Just ahead this week on Money Matters. The Hallyu effect in numbers. How much has the global wave of Korean culture contributed to the economy? We have some fresh stats out. Taking a shot at lighter soju drinks, Korea's most favorite alcoholic beverage, tones things down and grabs greater success. And making smarter payments with financial technology, FinTech. Where do countries in Asia stand in this field, and how rapidly are they advancing? What stories matter in Asia? We'll look at the changing landscape of business in the region next on Money Matters. Hello everyone, I'm Hans Schadl. Thank you for joining us once again this week. Let's begin with some of the top business headlines across Asia this week. Korea and Vietnam have signed a new free trade agreement which Seoul aims to implement by the end of the year. Korea's trade ministry expects the FTA will boost Korean exports of automobiles, electronics, and beauty products. Domestic builders and machinery manufacturers also stand to benefit from the deal. Several agricultural products such as rice, red peppers, and onions were kept out of the deal, protecting the respective markets for these items. Two-way trade between Korea and Vietnam reached more than $30 billion last year. President Park Geunhye is pushing the Korean government to pursue deregulation all the more aggressively. The president told her cabinet that too many regulations are hurting the country's global competitiveness, especially the so-called Galapagos regulations that have the effect of isolating the information technology industry in particular from the rest of the world. President Park also wants to cut into the country's remaining green belts and open the door to urban development in areas along the edges of major cities that have long been protected. For the second month in a row, Korean shipbuilders are leading the world in the volume of new orders. Global market researcher Clarkson Research Services says Korean shipbuilding companies have seen a 20% increase in orders from last year, taking more than 45% of new orders worldwide. Chinese shipbuilders came in second, taking 19% of total orders worldwide. Analysts say the recent rapid development of shale gas in the United States has created demand for new vessels to transport liquefied natural gas. And Samsung Electronics is setting out to build the world's largest semiconductor plant in the city of Pyeongtaek, 70 kilometers south of Seoul. The plant will be roughly 2.9 million square meters. That's the size of 400 soccer fields combined. Samsung says by 2017 it will invest a total of around $14.2 billion in the facility. It's the biggest investment yet from Samsung into a single building. The tech giant expects the plant to create about 150,000 jobs. Time now for our front page segment. And if you're familiar with Korean pop culture, the word Hallyu, or Korean wave, has likely been part of your vocabulary for quite some time. And it refers to Korean cultural contents that have been well received in many other parts of the world. The question is, how much effect does Hallyu have when it comes to the local economy? Today we'll take a look at some figures announced recently.
The love for all things Korean, also known as Hallyu or the Korean wave, has been hitting all corners of the world. But how much does it rake in for the economy? Estimated figures were recently announced by the Korea Foundation for International Cultural Exchange. In a report based on 7,000 people in 29 countries, the foundation looked at the economic effects produced by Hallyu and the speed of growth of the central wave in each country. The report indicated exports related to Hallyu cultural contents and consumer goods, as well as earnings from tourism, reached roughly $6.2 billion, up 8.4% on year. Also, the economic effects induced from Hallyu, such as added production, value, and jobs, mounted to $11.5 billion in 2014, after seeing a steady rise over the years. The greatest contributor to the boost in the Hallyu economy was cosmetics. Last year, exports of Korean cosmetics accounted for $372 million, up a significant 60% compared to the previous year. In terms of the speed and degree of growth, there was a notable difference among countries. The areas that posted high growth included Malaysia, Myanmar, Vietnam, Uzbekistan, and Indonesia. On the other hand, countries such as Iran, India, and Japan saw interest in Hallyu waver, creating greater need for enhanced cultural exchange programs and closer ties with such nations.
And joining us now to talk a bit more about the Korean wave and its economic effects is Professor Roald M Lee. He studies East Asia at Australian National University. Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for taking time to speak with us. So are there any particular segments or fields within the Korean wave that you think are especially ripe for growth?
Sure. I think that there's still the possibility for growth. There are certain areas in particular where we're actually seeing a decline. Interestingly, Japan has shown a decline over the last year in nearly all areas that are marked as related to the Korean wave, such as clothing, food products, drinks, etc. It's even in terms of tourism, we're seeing about a 20% decrease, which is interesting. So apart from the fact that it's generally growing, I think Japan shows that there are still things to be fixed, which would allow further growth in the near future.
And before we go, Professor Lee, what are some of the factors that perhaps at times inhibit or interrupt the growth of the Korean wave? And what steps would you suggest the country take to alleviate those?
Ultimately, it's always going to be a real challenge to kind of open a market as stubborn as, for example, Europe. What I would expect to be able to at least counter some of the kind of the negative Orientalist views that are rampant, of course, across the world and not just in Europe, is something like what Korea is currently doing, is creating a copy image of Hollywood in Korea. So it's know-how, it's training, it's the design of the movie industry, and Korea, I think, is in a very good position to do so. It's not only centrally located, but it does have the expertise to gain foothold in this particular market.
Well, we've been speaking with Professor Roald M Lee. He studies East Asia at Australian National University. Thank you again, Professor Lee, for sharing your insights with us.
For this week's In Numbers, we'll be looking at a recent trend being seen in major cities across the globe. Now, less people are leaving for the suburbs and more are choosing to stay in the city. In order to accommodate these residents, metropolitan areas are always looking to expand, whether it be upwards or outwards. But going up seems to be the more popular choice these days, with more skyscrapers popping up across city skylines. Now, skyscrapers are buildings typically over 106 meters, which provide a number of conveniences for both living and for business. But they've also become a symbol of city status. Now, a recently published skyscraper study ranks cities in terms of skyscraper rent. And no surprise, the #1 position has long been and is still held by Hong Kong, the world's leader in skyscrapers with over 303 skyscraper buildings and a going rate of $2,696 per square meter. New York is quickly closing in with 237 skyscraper buildings and a $1,615 per square meter price tag. Seoul comes in at number 10 in terms of having the most skyscrapers with 70 skyscraper buildings, but in terms of price per square meter at $358, Seoul has the 18th most expensive skyscraper rent in the world. Now that's looking at just skyscrapers, but what about overall city rent? It's not cheap living in the city, with places like New York and London notorious for their pricey costs of living. Seoul is another metropolis with famously expensive rent as well, and a report by the U.S.-based real estate firm Cushman & Wakefield found that the district of Myeongdong in Seoul has the 8th most expensive rent in the world at $8,940 per square meter. Now, Ginza, Tokyo also makes a list as the 7th most expensive with $9,141 per square meter as well. And the top two most expensive districts in the world are Fifth Avenue, New York at $33,572, followed by Causeway Bay in Hong Kong, which comes with a price of $26,238 per square meter. Although it's great to live in some of the most trendy places in the world, you better get ready to pay for the hefty price tag that comes with it. That wraps up this week's In Number. I'll be sure to keep an eye on any new trends and developments we'll be seeing.
Time now for our Bits in Biz segment. And of course, trends in business evolve rapidly by the day. And we have some of the most eye-catching stories now with Saw Mizarang. Hello, Mizarang.
Hello, good to be here. Hans, have you seen the latest Avengers sequel yet?
Not yet, Mizarang, I confess. But I hear it's doing quite well at the box office.
Definitely. It's been #1 at the Korean box office for 3 straight weeks now, and over 9 million people have seen it so far. And the first story I have for you is related to it. Korean tech giant Samsung and Walt Disney's Marvel recently launched a marketing campaign for the movie Avengers 2 Age of Ultron in time for the film's US release earlier this month. The 2-minute trailers use Samsung's virtual reality technology to immerse viewers in a 3D world where they get to experience being a superhero such as Iron Man and Captain America. Now, this is not the first time that the Avengers sequel has collaborated with teams in Korea. 15 minutes of the movie was filmed in Seoul last year as part of an agreement with the tourism ministry, which reimbursed 30% of the production costs, or $3.7 million back to Marvel in hopes of boosting the country's national brand value. Well, next, I'm sure you've tried one of Korea's favorite popular spirits, soju.
I have indeed, many times.
Many times. There are many different varieties out there, but there's one that people just can't seem to get enough of.
Korea's favorite alcoholic beverage, soju, is getting lighter and softer.
When we think of the clear spirit soju, what usually comes to mind is the strong kick that comes with it. But nowadays, a lot of soju is getting a lot milder. And recently, a brand of soju with just 14% alcohol has been put out on the market, and then it's been enjoying massive success, selling out in a lot of stores.
Exported to over 60 countries around the world, soju is considered one of Korea's classic alcoholic beverages. In the past, its alcohol content was between 25 to 30%, but since the 90s, the numbers have been dipping. Amidst this growing trend for low-alcohol soju, one brand that rolled out last March has been enjoying huge popularity. With just 14% alcohol and a hint of citron, the soju quickly spread by word of mouth on social media and has even led to product shortages at major retail outlets.
소주는 좀 도수가 높아가지고 혼자 사 먹기 좀 그랬거든요. 근데 이렇게 순해지고 맛도 막 과일 향이 나고 이렇게 하니까 좀 접하기 쉬워진 것 같아요.
이 저도화 트렌드는 전 세계적으로 공통이라고 보여집니다. 맛 자체도 유자 과즙을 사용해서 기존 과일주하고 달리 좀 신선한 프레시한 맛을 좀 유지했고, 또 하나는 가격 자체가 좀 착한 가격, 이런 게 성공률이라고 보여집니다.
I suppose from a health point of view, this is also a favorable trend because it's more moderate now, the drinking with these lower qualities of alcohol.
That's right, and that's the one popular reason. The other one is, of course, that the drinking culture itself is changing. So, as you mentioned, people prefer enjoying a casual drink or two as opposed to binge drinking, so they look for milder options. And also, there are more women now in the workforce, and drinking isn't frowned upon, so there are more female drinkers, and they usually go for the lighter drinks than men, choosing the low alcohol options when they can.
And for the companies, this must be a win-win. They can squeeze out more profits by watering down the alcohol content.
Definitely. So more profit for the companies. For one, sales increase because people will generally consume more bottles per sitting than with the stronger versions. And as you mentioned, the production costs are lowered because less ethanol is required.
Lots of interconnected economic and social factors with the production of soju, Mizarang.
That's right.
What next do you have for us?
Well, staying in Korea, the month of May has many celebratory days, and it's usually one of the peak seasons for the floral market, with many gifting flowers to one another. Now, one example is the carnation. Symbolizing admiration and love, the red flower has long been a staple gift for Parents' Day and Teachers' Day in Korea. Unfortunately for Korean farmers, though, almost all the carnations sold in Korea are foreign varieties, and it's estimated that around $350,000 are paid in royalties each year. But the bigger problem faced by the Korean floral industry is that consumers nowadays tend to forego flowers altogether, opting for gifts that are more practical and longer lasting. As a result, sales of flowers in May have decreased by about 30% on year for the past few years. And wrapping up, marriage rates continue to drop in Korea and Japan as dejected 20s are delaying it or writing it off altogether. In Korea, they're called the 삼포 세대, a generation that has given up dating, marriage, and childbirth in the face of rising unemployment rates and financial hardships. The marriage rate last year reached a 10-year low at just 6 weddings per 1,000 people. In Japan, the so-called Satori Seidai is an equivalent, and they're the generation that grew up during Japan's last 2 decades and have learned not to have any dreams for fear of being disappointed. Now, Japan's marriage rate last year was even lower than Korea at 5.3 couples tying the knot per 1,000 people. And following this trend, the wedding businesses in both countries, such as reception halls and designer dresses, are suffering from the continuing decline in sales.
I think many people increasingly worry about the long-term prospects for their children given these kinds of trends you've talked about.
That's right. And I just mentioned about the 3 things that they give up on, but now people say they actually give up on 5 things. So in addition to dating, marriage, and childbirth, they're saying the younger generation also give up on having a social life and owning their own homes. So it's a pretty bleak outlook for not only the younger generation, but also for the businesses involved.
Oh, struggling middle class all around, I think, is part of the underlying dynamic here. That's Bits and Biz with Sam Arirang. Thanks so much for your report.
Thanks for having me.
Time now for our Asia in Depth segment, and finance and technology have joined forces recently, lending way to the emergence of a new industry, FinTech. That's the shorthand there. There are efforts being made around the world to grow this FinTech market, and Korea, of course, is no exception. Our Im Yoon-hee is here to tell us more about some of these endeavors. Hello, Yoon-hee.
Hello, that's right. So I know, Hans, you're well aware of Korea's reputation as an information technology powerhouse. But when it comes to FinTech, Korea has seen some relatively slow progress. Now, unlike some other Northern European countries that have been using such technologies for nearly a decade, the situation in Asia is quite different. Now, China has seen significant boosts starting last year, and Korea is still in its initial stages. Let's take a look at what progress has been made so far.
There are more than 100 million smartphone users in China. The popularity and widespread use of these devices has led to the growing use of smart electronic payments.
I'm here in Beijing and I'm about to pay for my taxi fare using my smartphone. Obviously, it saves me on time and is much more convenient. Done. Now, this form of payment is a prime example of financial technology, also called FinTech. And here in China, FinTech is catching on quickly, becoming an option for many more smartphone users.
If you hit the streets of Beijing and some of its main commercial districts these days, you can easily see people using their mobile phones to buy goods as opposed to using cash or credit cards. But it's not just for buying products. The smarter payment options are entering many new realms of the market and growing at a rapid pace. The fintech industry is considered a budding field that will lead the global financial market in the future. In countries such as Finland and Sweden, the governments have been actively involved in promoting the use of fintech. But why is this industry seen as one with such growth potential?
핀테크 산업이 활성화되게 된 것은 무엇보다 스마트폰의 보급입니다. 은행이나 신용카드가 많이 보급되지 않은 그러한 곳에서도 많은 사람들이 스마트폰을 갖고 있었거든요. 특히 중국의 경우는 위어바오라는 그러한 알리바바의 서비스를 통해서 1년에 한 8천만 개 이상의 어떤 계좌가 생겨나는, 그걸 통해서 MMF 상품을 8천여만 명한테 파는 이런 일들이 일어나면서 전 세계적으로 핀테크 열풍이 불고 있는 것 같습니다.
The global market for fintech has been on a steady rise, and by 2017, it's expected to reach roughly $721 billion. Korea's market has also been on an upward trend, with mobile transactions hitting roughly $7 billion last year.
Now, this is a much sought-out Korean department store by Chinese tourists, and as you can see, these Korean businesses have adopted new practices to accommodate for their Chinese customers, turning to FinTech. Now, this new, easier form of electronic payment is being seen in locations across the country, and now it looks like China's popular Alipay is poised for growth here in Korea.
The number of Chinese tourists visiting Korea last year stood at roughly 6 million people, with one traveler spending more than $2,000 per visit. And now they can shop with Alipay at many different outlets, including department stores, banks, and convenience stores. While using smartphone applications, they can easily wire money and even take out loans or register for fun products.
使用支付宝钱包不需要带银行卡，然后手续费也不需要，然后汇率也特别好，所以我们会经常使用支付宝钱包来付款。
중국 관광객 방문이 꾸준하고 많은 선물을 구입하시고 계시는데요. 중국에서는 보편적인 알리페이 결제 서비스를 도입함으로써 중국 관광객들에게 결제 편의성을 제공하고 다양한 프로모션을 확대해 나갈 것으로 기대하고 있습니다.
Last September in Korea, tech company Daum Kakao launched a service called KakaoPay, using a payment platform called Mpay created by LG CNS. Following suit, Korea's leading portal website Naver launched its own mobile payment service called LinePay for its overseas users. It's soon expected to roll out Naver Pay here in Korea. The Korean government has been moving to introduce internet-based banks, an element it considers crucial to the development of FinTech. The country, however, is still in the early stages when it comes to this field.
금융산업이나 IT 산업이 발전한 그런 아주 작은 선진국이었기 때문에 IT와 금융의 선진국이었기 때문에 오히려 핀테크의 발전이 더딜 수 있고요. 약간은 우물안 개구리처럼 옛날 방식의 규제, 옛날 방식의 기술 여기에 안주하고 그래서 젊은 창업가들이나 젊은이들이 새로운 핀테크를 만들어 나가는데 오히려 어려움을 느끼고 있는 그런 역설적 상황이 나타나고 있습니다.
This is why the government has been pushing for regulatory reform in areas that hinder growth in the financial technology sector. For online-only banks, it has vowed to announce plans next month and submit a revised legislation to Parliament in the latter half of the year.
So Geunhye, let's focus on Korea just for a minute. It seems that circumstances are beginning to ease. The government is trying to lighten up on some of the regulations that might have slowed the growth in this area. But still, electronic payment systems have some side effects.
Right, so some finance experts have voiced concern over the idea or the possibility of foreign companies taking the lead in Korea's fintech market. Plus, fintech also introduces an aspect of security breaches that could ultimately affect the entire financial sector. So not only that, but the pace of rapid development, people say, could accelerate changes in the local financial market and lead to fast-paced restructuring that could eventually cause confusion and chaos. So the Korean government needs to really think about how to expand this, both in terms of quality and quantity.
So quite a balancing act here, Geunhye, when it comes to navigating convenience and security. Thank you so much, Geunhye, for your report.
You're always welcome.
And that will wrap things up this week here on Money Matters. I hope you enjoyed the program. We'll continue bringing you plenty of stories as they unfold in Asia and give you a view of the changing landscape of business in the region each week. I'm Hans Schadl. Thank you, as always, for watching.